Hello and welcome to another episode of Alf Zoo. Today we're going to talk about the future of IT, and with me at the table I have Chris Rixon, all the way from Wales.
That's it. Good morning.
What happened?
What do you mean? What happened?
Oh, there's just a big pause. I thought like this was a dramatic Chris Dancy entrance or something. Or did I imagine that? Chris Rixon, did you see that pause, or was it just me?
I did. The whole universe stopped.
Yeah, just making sure. Okay.
I'm glad to have both of you here because you both have spent a lot of time, especially recently, thinking and writing and digesting the differences and the nuances of consumerization of IT, the future of IT, what it really means. Because it's right now, to someone like me, it's just marketing words, it's concepts, it's very esoteric, it sounds cool. I want a vendor to come in and present something for me. But I've also matured out of that, and I want to understand how this is going to impact me today. So when you hear words like consumerization of IT and enhanced user experience and so on, what does that mean to the average company? Mr. Rixon, what's your experience been?
I think a very important word that goes along with consumerization and consumption as it relates to IT is choice. And I think that for the first time in a long time, end users are able to, or business users, let's call them business users, are able to choose a great deal more about how they interact with technology, both in the workplace and increasingly outside of work. And with that choice comes a need to look very, very carefully at how and what you provide as a service for an organization. And that's still probably a little bit barking words for you, Alf. Let me try and make it a little even more concrete.
What the heck do you really mean?
Well, I think what I mean is that I can and will go out, for example, and choose the kind of technology that I want to use in the workplace. You may or may not officially let me connect as an IT function to your infrastructure, but you, before too long, you won't have any choice. So that's a whole non-debate. I think that the concept of bringing your own device, I think, is a false debate. It's just it is what's happening, and I think organisations just need to be prepared and be able to respond to that. But that's me exercising choice. I would like to do that. I'm sufficiently tech savvy to choose what I want to use, and I'm going to do so. And to a certain extent, there's a potential huge win in there for IT departments in terms of reduced cost, etc. So getting wise to it is very, very important. And any intrinsic risks or assumed risks that go along with it can be mitigated. So I think, again, that's a non-concern. So that's one example of just how I would make a choice, and there are many, many others. I'm empowered to make that choice. The unique thing about this scenario right now is that IT now has a choice in terms of how they respond to it, or indeed if they respond to it, and I think that's really interesting.
Mr. Dancy, all this choice that we are handed, can we handle it?
Yeah, I've been a big proponent of consumerization, not the concept, but the ideology being about choice. It's one of the misnomers that we have when we have this debate, when we talk about these buzzwords, and I'm just so sick of the actual words it's difficult for me to even say them anymore. I was just at a conference, and I actually asked 300 people in a room, and I said, has everyone here heard about BYOD and consumerization, blah, 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 in your sessions this year? Every hand went up. Did you hear that last year? Every hand went up. Did you hear it 3 years ago? Every hand went up. How many people have heard this for at least 4 years? Half the hands went up. And I said, okay, how many of you have programs in place for bring your own device or some type of mitigated trust transaction, right? Which is a nice way of saying pilot, mitigated trust transaction. Half the hands went up. So and it kind of dawned on me, wow, as leaders of industry, as thinkers, we're wasting people's time in these sessions. They're listening, they're scribbling on these notes, but it doesn't matter. It happened, and we haven't really pushed the dialogue forward. So I think choices, to Chris Rixon's point, is the number one thing. You know, I always go a little bit darker with it, because as, you know, someone who's excelled in my career, and as someone who started out in IT, consumerization's always existed for executives and people in IT. We were always allowed to do these things. This is not a secret. If you were in IT, you could do stuff that no one else could. If you were an executive, you could get the things no one else was allowed to have. It's the democratization of that power that no one wants to talk about, you know. So I think choice is really spot on. You know, in The Matrix, there's a scene where, you know, Agent Smith says to Neo, or Neo says to Agent Smith, or no, sorry, Neo says to the architect, so the problem is choice. And the architect says, yeah, this is the seventh time you've been here. And I thought to myself, this is what we're doing. We're going back over and over and over again, you know, and taking the same door.
And so you don't think that we are improving overall, or you say we do this over and over?
No, well,
is this moving everybody forward, or?
Chris Rixon's much more eloquent answering that question. Yes. I just want to say that continual service improvement is a force of nature, and sometimes you're not part of the improvement. So it is improving. What's not improving is your choice on whether you're part of it or not.
So do you think so, Chris Rixon, that this will actually help?
Don't pit us against each other.
It is a zoo.
He said
it is a zoo. That's right. Okay.
I think that there is this latency to respond. I think many IT departments have caused their own challenges, and I suspect in those seminars that Chris talked about, where they've been nodding along for 3 or 4 years. And saying what a fantastic idea is, may or may not have been matched by action on their side and readiness on their side. So
yeah, but half the hands did say they were working on plans now.
Yeah. I mean, and that's very good. I mean, that's very encouraging in many senses, because I think that that's better than I hoped it might be, actually.
Yeah, I was shocked, Chris, and it made me think to myself, what happens if you if you were to do this with a congregation, right? How many of you have heard you need to be good to your neighbor? How many of you have heard it for more than 10 years? How many of you are actually being good to your neighbor? If you got half the hand, you'd consider, maybe I can slow down on the messaging.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. But I think that also what's very interesting is what's happened in parallel is technology has moved on such that technology departments, IT departments, now have access to devices and capabilities that they can readily put in the hands of a business user that they want to engage with, that is capable of doing stuff that finally delivers on the promise of consumerization. So I think that it's kind of that's interesting too. So there's this dynamic where there's been a need to catch up, but also the technology itself and the ubiquity of that technology has been catching up too, and that's enabled IT to do new things as it relates to giving a more consumer-like experience for end users.
Can you tell me more about that consumer-like experience?
Yeah,
in the enterprise versus.
I mean, no, I think it's even simpler than that. I think that it comes down to how effortless some of these interactions are. And funnily enough, I wrote about this quite recently, and I said, I don't know at which point our so-called civilized society became too lazy to drop a list down, for example, but we have become too lazy to do things like that. And I think we have been, as consumers in our everyday lives, we have been spoiled by organizations, business-to-consumer organizations who realized very early on that the easier you make something, the more intuitive you make something, and the more pleasure the experience of actually interacting with this service is, the more likely you are to do it.
Yeah, and we did a really good job in the 90s and the 2010s of reducing friction with automation. So we have no problem reducing the friction between us and technology. But when it comes to the choices we make about reducing it between each other or the technology we control to interface with other people, we literally shut down.
Yeah.
Why is it that you call it spoiled? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, I think
aren't we deserving, especially after having suffering through enough green and blue and black screens? Is it about time we get a bit of click and point and click?
Well, I think I mean spoiled because it's not really spoiled, because clearly that's the way things should be. But if you for many people, if they contrast how easy it was to order their week's groceries on an app, on an iPhone, right? How effortless it was, how someone had designed not only the interface but the experience such that I can not only repeat my shopping from last week, I haven't had to drop a single list down. I start typing tinned peaches, whatever it happens to be, and there's a flow to the design. There's a flow to the experience that someone has really, really thought about what it's like to be on the other end of that. And as a result, of course, I use it all the time, and we do it every week. I think the shock happens when you contrast that with your everyday experience of your own IT department as an end user. And even where they've invested a fair amount of time and effort into building a self-service capability that could be beautiful, very simple, easy to find, beautifully laid out. But I contrast it with this joyous experience of flow where there are no boxes and lists and everything else. And it's painful. And frankly, I'm going to pick up the phone. So, again, the intention was great, but if you've got a self-service experience that's ending in me picking up the phone, that's not mission accomplished.
And back to your choice question, or your choice comment.
Yes. But what happens?
Sometimes I want to pick up the phone. There are times when I don't want to use technology, and to me, the consumerization, if we were to boil it down, just means I'm a picky, not stable person who wants to choose how to talk to you based on how I'm feeling.
Yes.
I'm like that. I know if I pick up the phone, I'll get the resolution I'm seeking, or at least I know where I stand in the process. If I submit something through a machine, there's a lot of black holes that thing can disappear into. So
and sometimes I'm in the mood to trust a machine. Sometimes I'm in the mood to yell at people. I don't know how to explain. The closest I get to explaining is like over the last 5 years, and I talk about this in presentations all the time. Here in North America, or at least in the United States, I'll be very small. There were people lined up in their cars for the ATM machine, but no one in their car to talk to a teller. There will be people lined up in a grocery store for the self-scanners, but no one willing to walk over to the 3 empty registers. We've made our decisions. Support, when it's at its most frictionless, is organicless. Period.
What does that mean?
No people.
No carbon involved.
No, carbonless support. You heard it here first on Alpha Zoo. It seems to be, and I don't know. I mean, you can tell me about whales. I mean, Chris, I don't know. Do you ever see people picking machines over available people for certain things?
They still mainly a sheep economy. What do you mean choosing machines?
Well, it's only 80-1 where I live in terms of humans. So we're slowly winning that battle. I think it's a very interesting point. I think there's also an element of generational preference in there as well. I think that what's becoming very clear and evident as a younger generation gets more and more senior in the organization, and it's very easy to underestimate how senior some of Generation Y and even people born in '93, so-called digital natives who are now 20, and and who take a digital-first approach to everything. And that population, by definition, is growing in the workplace, and those are the people who were not only expect but almost demand that kind of interaction, and kind of puzzled when you suggest doing something another way. So yes, absolutely. Here in the UK, you see people who would rather check out their shopping in a machine, in preference to going through a regular checkout. But I strongly suspect if you profiled those people, on average, you'd see some interesting demographic differences as well.
So this is more than just a fad, because for a very long time, I tend to be skeptic to any type of movement like this. But if you're talking about a generational shift driving it underneath, that this is more than just a new gear. This is something that's built into their DNA. This is here to stay? This modernization, this consumerization?
Without doubt. I think throughout human history, the less you've had to push something uphill to get a result, those kind of technologies catch on, right? So,
but history has also taken huge steps backward. After Rome, it took us hundreds of years to move forward, and so on.
Yeah.
So we could just as easily fall into quicksand, and this could be a trivial experiment to end up us missing 10 years of real.
Well, I mean, that's absolutely true, Alf, but I mean, that's kind of like the glass is half full argument. I mean, yes, there have been dark ages, but if you think about something as simple as the printing press, between the 15th and the 16th century, we had the printing press invented. Well, something happened after the printing press was invented. That was called the Renaissance, right? But right before we got into the big time of the Renaissance, it was the darkest of the Middle Ages, right? So, but it continually gets better. I mean, yes, I do agree with you completely, and I'd love to go down that rabbit hole, we just won't. I don't think we should. That we are in a very ugly period of time right now.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if I were to look at 10 years from now, we're looking at an age of abundance, like unlike anything we've seen in our history.
Well, and I think the defining difference, and Chris said the word earlier on, was about democracy as well. And I think that this revolution in how technology is consumed and who has access to it is defined by a democratic approach, right? I can go out and do what I like, and I can acquire a level of technological power that is, to anyone throughout history would just be mind-blowing. And the things that I can do with it in my day-to-day life outside the workplace are absolutely incredible if you stop to think about it. If you even contrast it with 5, 10 years ago, it's incredible. And I think, this is great. Getting into historical debate on the zoo, I think, is a fantastic thing. But I think that's what defines technological progress, the difference between technological progress now and the relative privilege in history. Only the privilege for having access to some of this groundbreaking stuff throughout history. But now we can, and those of us fortunate enough to live in the developed or developing world have access to incredible resources.
Yeah, it's a lot. I do like the historical stuff too. We don't do enough of that in tech. But Adam Smith, a great economist, said, "No society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which the greater part of the members are poor and miserable." And I think if you reduce society to organizational structure, that's absolutely what's happened here. I mean, we're looking at not a tech bubble, but an Adam Smith's economic philosophy applied against information economies. If we are in an information economy and an information age, then like I sometimes tell people, if you want to understand newer devices, newer technologies, look at the deaf. They've had to communicate with their hands, almost completely. If you really, really, I think, want to look at the new age of support, one of the things I kind of do, but I don't ever admit to it until just now, is I actually look at economic principles. Because if we are in an information economy, those principles, some of them will map directly. We don't have to make those mistakes. We have to think.
Well, information has become a new type of currency. And so one thing I wanted to ask, which is slightly outside of the enterprise focus we tend to have in the zoo here, but these type of new technologies, can we use those to, and go to Chris Rixon's point, to spread some of the wealth to the not so developed countries, to sort of kickstart them? Or is this something that only being enjoyed by the largest corporations in the world?
No, I think it's a very interesting point, and then there is the concept of information poverty, which is a lot of very interesting research is being done in terms of how important it is not to just close the wealth gap, but also if some societies are functioning with access to information, and how empowering that information is, and other societies are being that's either being withheld or they just don't have the wherewithal to access it. That creates a state of information poverty, and you are a whole new tier of disadvantage, not just through education, but of course it's very hard for a society that doesn't have that informational infrastructure to interact with those that do. So I think it's a very real challenge, and it's a very real problem, and that's why so many organizations are interested in propagating technology, and that being part of any revolution for society.
Yeah, I actually, like Chris, I'm very interested in watching this question also, because I feel in some way the concepts around digital duality and online versus online, it's a type of fetish for people. They actually use being online and access to information to justify their physical existence. And this is unique. This didn't happen 5 years ago. You didn't talk about these separate worlds. We talked about work and personal life, but that also was a fetish. We actually used work to justify having a personal life. We created a value-based structure from the lack of one that existed. It's like people kind of prove that there's this other world that exists online. In reality, no, that's an organic thing, just like this one is. You're just trying, whenever you say that out loud, you're actually lending emotional currency to your ego. And that's a really flat, Chris is very good at talking about this sort of stuff. We've had a lot of private talks about this. But when I think about nation states and continents that are what we consider third world, or even BRIC, that's not really third world, but Brazil, Russia, India, China. I think we still have about 10 years, in just my opinion, where money actually still makes a huge difference. They need clean water. They need money in those villages. They need access to healthcare. But past 10 years, and I'll barely be 54. When they have those things, I very much see them leapfrogging everything we're doing. If information is a currency,
let me ask you this, because it was something
they actually have time to study the history.
Premise that they do need.
Go ahead.
you based your argument on an interesting premise, which is old-fashioned for you, that they do need money to
I am Chris Dancy.
To do other things.
Yeah, they need money.
Let me ask you this: wouldn't it be easier, or not easier? Wouldn't it be possible to, instead of going with the traditional old technology of us, the Western world, coming to them and building for them what they need, doing a digital knowledge transfer, where, where they, using all these tools, using this collaboration, using this brand new digital world that we've created that actually exists now, to teach them to build their own bridges, rather than us coming and being, the mighty guy and fish for them and cook the fish and all. We actually teach them the fish. Is that something that's just out there, or is that something that's happening today? Because that's what I mean.
I think I look at it like a bow tie, right? So, the money needs to keep coming in, but the other side of the bow tie is, as they get that, they will just leapfrog back over. We're at an inflection point, if you want me to get specific, in about December 18th, 2017. That probably would freak people out that I even pulled a date on you. But post that, most of this stuff will be sorted out. I mean, you take something as simple as a 3D printer. You look at what Dean Kamen did with the water, So he created a very simple machine 4 years ago that you plug waste into one side. Literally, he wanted someone who had no education at all to be able to do this. Plug waste in one side in a tube, and on the other side, clean water comes. And it had to be, you had to have no energy, and enough to get it going, and then it just ran on its own. And he did this. He did not a problem. The problem he faced was getting it to the villages. So couldn't figure out how to do this. And then at that time, Coca-Cola came to him and said, "We want you to build us the fanciest Coke machine ever." And they came up with this thing called the Coke Fusion. And I'm not sure if it's in Europe or if, Chris, you've seen it, but it's a machine where you've got hundreds of choices on a touchscreen to make fountain soda. In return for the development of the Coke Fusion, for every Coke Fusion machine you see, Coke actually can get to these villages, right? You can get Coca-Cola anywhere. And they're putting one of his water machines in every village for every time you see a fusion machine. So again, it's that kind of bow tie effect. Once they get clean water, then at what point do we drop in, a 3D printer in 2016 to let them make simple tools and simple things? It just literally 10 years is going to go like that, and it's going to be crazy. We even thought this was happening.
We've taken this discussion, through history and economics and development.
You should hear Chris Rixon and I when we're alone on the phone talking about this stuff. He's smart. He got me into the Long Now. He got me into the Long Now organization, which is crazy cool.
If I am a CTO, if I'm an IT director, and I am interested in getting some of this stuff going in my corporation, we have some mobility that we try to manage with some mobile device management. We have some SaaS, we do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I don't really have a strategy. I don't really know where to start to deploy modern technology to consumerize IT, to improve the end user experience. Where do I start? Is there anything out there right now?
There certainly is. But I think in terms of a practical place to start, and some very interesting conversations last week at the Service Desk and IT show in London, where that exact question came up from a couple of CIOs who came on our stand, on our booth, to have a conversation about they'd seen some of the hype around my IT, and they wanted to say.
Let me, for the record, category say it's not hype.
No. By which I mean buzz, tension. And whilst they wanted to know more about that, what they were really genuinely looking for was a starting point. And they realized that the huge gap that they had was an understanding of what was relevant. Their principal fear was about that there was so much choice available for their business users that their biggest fear was doing something, and for that to be the IT equivalent of watching your dad dance at a disco, right? To get it wrong, to misinterpret the requirement and build yet another portal that nobody shows up to. But where they've sunk a lot of dollars into the design, etc., etc. So the conclusion they'd come to, which I thought was very, very smart, was that the first step was engagement and understanding who that audience was and how they want to consume those services and where they want to consume those services. Being mindful of the fact that the more and more functions and some traditionally office-based functions were on the move. People were either working from a flexible location or part of their role mandated travel, etc. But they realized, as 40-something male IT leaders, that they was a little out of touch with what was relevant. And that was finding that out and getting engaged and asking people how they work with technology, out of the workplace, etc., was an ideal first step. And then they had some really interesting, very ordinary housekeeping, I don't want to say mundane, but some basics to nail down in their IT service management as well. If they were going to throw the gates open and make something that end users really wanted to interact with, were they ready? Could they actually handle the fact that this ambition they'd had for many, many years of empowering end users to do a lot of the lifting themselves through technology? They've been waiting for the rush for ages, and then it slowly dawned on them, well, hang on a minute. if 70% of our business users suddenly start engaging in self-service, are we equipped to answer the questions they have and provision the stuff they want, and etc.? So ahead of any technological investment they were going to make, the starting place was engagement and readiness, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And yes, there's some very cool technology, and MIT is part of that, that helps to address some of that. But a very pragmatic response, I thought.
No, Mr. Dancy, anything cool out there where I can put in my office?
I already tweeted once during this, so I love listening to everything Mr. Rixon always has to say, especially when he's telling me about something he experienced, because it helps me be in touch with a reality that's never really been friendly to me. But he used a couple key phrases I wanted to make sure I phrased my answer in context of. He said 40-something IT leaders. All right, so I'm 40-something. I'm not an IT leader, but I definitely think about IT a lot, and I use a lot of it. I think Kia Bonilla is an IT leader. I think our CEO is an IT.
Kia Bonilla is the CTO at BMC Software.
Yeah, Bob Beecham is an IT leader. I think there are IT leaders all over the place, right? But 40-something IT leaders. One of the paradigm shifts that I have to constantly remind myself was, if people my age, I won't speak for people in their 50s, and actually I'll just speak for me. The idea was get an education, go to work, and do what you were told, and occasionally get another certification or acquire some type of knowledge. The 5-year span that Chris talked about earlier has been nothing more than everybody spending every spare cycle getting more knowledge. Knowledge has become the greatest empowerer, and just like taking your spouse for a drive, it's also a weapon. Yeah, don't go that way. More people use GPS as a way to keep their spouse quiet than actually navigate, right? So information is very tenuous when we think about what we've done I'm sorry, what I've done. I have to keep making it very personal, so I won't talk for every 44-year-old guy out there. But CIOs, the ones he just described, I can totally see why they would be like, and the other thing he said, why they'd be like, well, if we do this and we get 70% raise, are we ready for it? And they really want to slow down. Because now they're kind of like, wow, it's like being Rip Van Winkle. You just wake up and like, what happened, right? How did this happen? And we have to be kind to ourselves, right? That's why I practice mindfulness. You need to be kind to the, I've been working. I didn't have time to keep up. I mean, sorry, someone had to keep the system running while you were reading Twitter. That's the reality of it, right? And I think truly academic people can just take little bits of information and piece them into the larger message. As far as the solution, I think we did two great webinars. I don't know if you do show notes, but we did two great webinars with David Cannon and Chris Rixon. One was on creating a concierge desk, and one was on organizational change. And I think those were probably two of the proudest pieces of content I've ever been a part of. And I was just that crazy guy, on the screen. Just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So, I encourage you to go out and look for those. You can probably Google. I know I've got them all on Pinterest. If you look for Concierge Bar or BMC Concierge Bar, you can find all that. Or Organizational Change, Chris Rixon, you'll find it on if you Google that. But, to end this, the way that, well, I'm sorry, not to end it, but to end kind of my line of thinking around this, my IT is part of this. And I joined BMC. This is not a secret. I've written blogs about it. I wrote blogs when I joined ServiceNow about why I joined ServiceNow. I wrote blogs about why I went to Ping. My IT, categorically, let's not have any confusion. None. Does not exist in any other vendor camp in our space or in IT in general, in marketing. It is that disruptive. Microsoft, nothing like it. Oracle, nothing like it. Salesforce, nothing like it. Right?
There's nothing out there that...
Nothing on the planet. But I understand people want to be humble and they want to, it's a good thing. No, this is not a good thing. This is why I think some of the analysts haven't taken a time to actually acknowledge it properly. Because what do they write about now that it's been answered? Outside in, empowered, location-based knowledge, access to personalized services, calendaring. And this is like version 1. This isn't even talking about what is going to happen. So, you know, I think it's so important that people do consider what Chris is talking about and what those CIOs said to him. But more importantly, it's happened. And you can do this today. And this is not some big company pitch. You know, I keep begging Jason Fry to give me a copy of my IT for my house, only because there are certain things I don't want to remember or look for. You know, and I think if we don't actually wrap our heads around what my IT is, and you can go out and download it right now from the App Store. I did it in bed last night on my iPhone. I didn't know that we'd downloaded it so you could download it and start using it with without signing in a bunch of other stuff. You can get it right now and start playing with it on your phone right this minute. You know, just go to the App Store, type in my IT. It will blow your mind when you are suddenly aware of contextually location-based information, and more importantly, form-based workflow. There's no forms to fill out. You know, Chris was talking about, you know, his my IT. You know, what I love about it so much is I don't even have to type if I don't want to for the areas where I'm typing. You know, if I just want to like create a ticket on it, and you know, me, I've always got to have some like technology. You know, I'm in my system now. I'm going to go ahead and I'll touch paste, right? So I'm going to go ahead and here.
For the viewer, so for the viewer who doesn't know what it is, can you just quickly explain what my IT is? It a mobile app? It runs on iPad? Is it some kind of composite app with various IT-related services available in one single spot?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you an overview in a second, but again, I just want to show what it's like for me and I you know, a user, right?
Yep.
In fact, so there it is. I hit 2 buttons. I didn't fill out any forms, and it asked me to describe my request. I'm just going to come in here and say, Google Voice sometimes doesn't work for me. Right, so I can talk to it, right? So, you know, again, being able to talk to something and have it just put it, that's a big deal. But more importantly, I come in here and, you know, as a user, I don't want to use a bunch of fancy tools. I just want to like hold this up and take a photo and have the photo attached to the ticket. Now that is geolocated with my voice, my photo, and in the system, and I didn't fill out any forms. It just works. And more importantly, if I'm in an office and I don't know how to do something, you know, the location part of this is really cool. So you can just come in here, and again, you can watch all sorts of fun videos online. But the idea that you can zoom in to where you are and type on resources, find me this conference room, find me this piece of document. What I love to do is I like to leave my presentations that I'm going to present in those locations so I can get rid of a file system. I just launch my IT, bring up the location where I am, hit the action for show me the presentation for this meeting. I don't carry files around, right? So again, you asked for a simple explanation. I talk about this like it's my IT, so I don't want to be inappropriate. So I'll let Chris Rixon give you kind of the official thing. But to me, this is game changing. I can't talk about it in all the the right marketing business. He won't either, but I don't want to make sure.
And I don't think anyone in their right mind has any interest in the right marketing.
But Chris knows what I'm trying to say. I can't give you the 5-second. Chris, can you explain what it is for you?
Well, I think you did an admirable job, and I think for me it kind of crystallizes when you show my IT to someone in the business, someone who is struggling with the challenges that we've talked about on this, right? So how do I stay relevant? How do I give people access to IT services no matter where they are on something that they would actually enjoy using, right? These are all the sort of conversations you have. I don't have to go to a portal. I don't have to drop stuff down. I just want an app where everything you do as a technology function is accessible within a couple of taps.
And it's important to remember, to me, it's not a portal at all. Because portals are destinations. I'm moving. This moves with me.
Yeah.
This is more like this isn't a portal. This is a Stargate, right? So you treat your IT.
Moon.
There's a tweet for you. So treat your IT users, but more importantly, like I said, I can't explain this the way we would like in a white paper to a CIO, because for me, it's my IT.
That's right. It is. It's experiential. And I think that is, you could see on the faces of people at the Service Desk and IT show, I think, you know, there's probably industry stalwarts and people who've been going to that show forever, throughout all its transformations. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, this was the first time that many of them said, wow, I've come to a show and I've just seen something that I have never, ever seen before. Genuinely. This is not a reworking of an old concept. This is not a promise made good by new technology. This is a philosophical shift in terms of who holds the power and what it's like to experience IT. And so, you know, in a venue like this, Alf, it's hard not to gush, right? So I shall stop gushing. But
oh, I think I gushed. I think you were okay.
So
I'm what you would call a fanboy. But, you know, as someone who, my entire career has been in IT, right? Literally, from my teens to now, I've only ever worked with computers. It's because I'm not really good with people. At the Pink Show, this was the first time I left the show with something I could show people. People would stop me in the hallway and go, hey, how you doing? How you doing? What is, you know, hey, you won this award for innovation. Can you show? And I just showed it to them, and I give them some real quick example. They lose their minds. And it's not like you couldn't leave with an application. We have mobile applications in our portfolio at the company. A lot of service management, a lot of IT, you know, all the big names I have, they have mobile applications. But a mobile application is not a mobile experience. All right? That just means I can pick up my laptop and walk around with it. Or I can pick up my computer and walk around with it. It's when it understands. Again, I want, you know, I would love for my IT to understand if I log a ticket standing up versus sitting down. You know, or using just the sensors in it, right? There's a lot of stuff we could get out of here that would negate priority or urgency if we just paid attention to how they were gripping it or where they were holding it. You take something like the Samsung S4, which is going to be released, that thing has pressure sensors on it. It knows how hard you're squeezing it, and it knows the humidity and temperature in the room. Those are value-based data we could use for ticket routing. It blows my mind that we're here. We're here. The world I wanted is here. And I'm just so very proud of BMC and everything they've done. You know, it'll be one of the greatest moments of my life when I look back on my career that I was here when something like this happened.
So it's really as good as sliced bread?
For me, absolutely. But then again, I don't know how to do anything but support people and do it really poorly. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, I really want to thank the two of you for taking the time coming into the zoo. Mr. Rixon.
Thank you. Can I just say that the peanuts are terrible? It's not a great zoo.
We're cutting down. We try to save money. You know how it is nowadays. Yes. Mr. Dancy, good to see you again.
Thank you, Alf. It's such a pleasure to be with you a second time. I watched your highlight video on our last show. It made me laugh. So I tried not to use any props this time. And thank you, Chris Rixon. I'm such a huge fan. You know, there's so few people. Everyone thinks I'm so. No one calls me because they think I'm too busy. I always go, I'd call you, but you're always so. You're so busy. Chris Rixon's one of those people. Like, I am so excited to know in my career. So thank you, Chris, for being on today.
And with that love hug, we'll end today's zoo.
Thanks, Alf.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.